So, I want to talk to you now about understanding some of the price differences between hosting things in an on premise environment versus hosting things in the cloud environment. Um, what you might find that might blow your mind is that in most cases, there is over a 50% price drop when you host things in the cloud on average for most companies and most organizations. Now, to sort of think about that, you have to think about what it takes to manage on-premise equipment. All right, we'll start with just the servers. If you do a quick Google search or Bing search on just server computer, you'll see that there are various types of servers, including a almost $300,000 one here with tons of GPUs apparently. But you'll find that there are various types of servers that would meet the needs of what it is you need. You have to say, okay, well, what is this server going to do? Is it going to be an email server? Is it going to be a database server? Is it a file server? Okay, so that's the first thing. You got to buy the server. The next thing is you have to purchase licensing for that server. Based on what operating system you're going to use and application you're going to use. So, for example, if I say Windows Server 2022 license, we can figure out, okay, what's the price, the licensing for a client access license going to be. All right, so here you go. So you got to factor in the cost of that. Okay, now you've got to factor in what is the server going to be used for. Is it going to be I don't know, let's say it's going to be an email server exchange. So we'll say like Exchange 2019 license cost. So we'll do a quick search on that. So you can see various websites that will provide you with a Exchange server license. One server license $552 for standard edition. That don't include enterprise. Okay. So you have to do some searching around. Here's some other examples of licenses. You have to think about licensing for that. Okay. All of that is a consideration. Now take all of that and think about, okay, you have to have space in a building somewhere. You have to pay for the electricity. You have to pay for the cooling, because you have to have air conditioning. You have to have the air conditioning systems. And if you're really hardcore, you need to have a server room backup generator. Okay, so you're going to have to purchase that if you're hardcore and you want, be able to handle redundancy issues. You're going to have server room UPS, uninterruptible power supplies to keep the equipment, because you can't just have a backup generator, because backup generators take a moment to turn on. So if the power goes out, backup generator will come on, but it'll be too late. The servers will already be down. So you have to have the uninterruptible power supplies, UPS systems, to keep things up and going for when the power goes out, and then the generator can kick in as the battery backups are dying. Think about all that for a minute. All right. Now let's think in terms of something like Azure. You go here, you say, okay, well, if we look at the total cost of ownership calculator, you just do a Google search on Azure calculator, you can find this. You can put in what the cost is going to be on average, and if you use Linux, you can use a Linux server. That's going to save some money versus doing Windows. All right, we could do virtual machines. We'll say Linux. How many virtual machines do we need? Well, we'll just say 2 for redundancy. We use Hyper-V. How many processor cores do you want? We'll say 2. How much RAM do you want? We'll say, how about 32 gigs of RAM? Okay. And we can add all that in there. That's just the first, kind of workload maybe we're looking at. Calculate, we got to put some more information here. Networking. What do we want our outbound? Okay, destination. Maybe this is going to be, let's go with East US. Okay, if we want to put some databases on there, if there's any of that we want, we can put that in there. Add storage. Let's do that. Add storage. So what do we want? Local disk, saying we can go with HDD or solid state if we want. Specify our capacity in terabytes. Maybe we'll just do 2. All right, anything else there? And then at that point, we can adjust. They tell you adjust for assumptions. Do you want geo redundant storage? That gets into like replicating your data to data centers across the world. So you can put all that stuff in and kind of factor in. They talk about the IT labor cost, electricity cost. So you'd specify that. Let's click next. All right. So cost over 5 years, $59,267. That's on premise. Cost in Azure, $20,000. So this is why I say over a 50% difference in cost. All right, $59,000 there, $20,000 there. Now you can be more detailed than I did. I basically threw that in, very quickly for you. All right. Now that is if you want to host virtual machines and all that in Azure. You can, if you decide to go the software as a service route, platform as a service, software as a service route, you could say, well, you know what? We're not going to do a server for Exchange at all. We're not going to use SQL at all, because you can host all of this. We could do all of this. We could use Microsoft's Microsoft 365 instead of just IaaS, infrastructure as a service, as our solution. So then again, that gets into Microsoft 365 licenses. We don't even have to have virtual machines. We could get rid of all of our on-premise servers. We don't need our email server because we have Exchange Online, right? We could use Exchange Online for managing our email. All we got to do is have licenses. So at that point, what we then got to do is we just got to calculate licenses. Let's look at Microsoft 365 E3 versus E5 license. Compare our licenses. We'll go there, and so we can see, okay, look, this is per user. So you do have to think now, okay, well, this is going to be on a monthly basis, 36 per user, right? If we have 100 users, we multiply that 36 times 100. We got 1,000 users, we multiply that by 1,000. If we're doing E5, then same thing, 57 times 1,000, okay? But we get rid of our on-premise equipment. We don't have any on-premise servers anymore for Exchange. For file servers, you could use OneDrive for Business and SharePoint to manage all of that, so you don't need file servers anymore. You don't need SharePoint because you got SharePoint Online. You don't need Skype for Business on-premise because you've got Teams. You can even get rid of voice over IP because Teams can do that. There's all this stuff you could get rid of, and you could go this route of paying the monthly fee as opposed to paying for all this equipment on-premise. So there's really different routes you could take. You can go into Azure, which you start hosting virtual machines in Azure. You could host Exchange, you could host SQL, you could host SharePoint, you could host everything as virtual machines out there in Azure, web servers, or you could go the route of Microsoft 365. Actually, you could do both. You could have a mix. You could have some stuff stored in the Azure environment and some stuff stored in the Microsoft 365 environment and just pay the monthly fee for licenses. Again, the big difference is if you're going to go the Azure route, you're just going to pay for the usage. So memory, CPU, storage, network bandwidth, all that, the usage in Azure. If you go the route of Microsoft 365, you're just paying a license per user. You can have both. You could be doing this both. We could choose, maybe we're going to use Azure for our web servers to host our web services on the internet and have scalability, and it'll all be done through virtual machines. We could have a load balancer, a virtual load balancer managing it all. And then maybe for email and SharePoint and file storage and all that, we use Microsoft 365. All right. So that is the idea. You kind of have to think about that. You have to think about all the costs that's involved in managing stuff in an on-premise environment versus how you could do it in the cloud. And then again, Microsoft does have the calculators to kind of help you with figuring that out. You can always do a search for Azure calculator as well. You can go to this pricing calculator, and you can add stuff in like a virtual machine and specify how powerful the virtual machine is going to be, and you can get an idea of what that might cost on a per month basis. So again, if I was thinking about a web server, here's an example: East US. Let's use Linux. Maybe it's going to be Ubuntu Linux web server, one virtual machine. This is how many hours we're going to use it. All right. And again, if you're thinking in terms of that, we just go here. We say, 730 divided by 24. That's 30 days basically. So the hours they're giving you there is monthly. How much CPU memory do you want, right? What are you looking for in terms of that? Right now it's sitting here at 2 virtual CPUs, 8 gigs of RAM, 50 gigs of storage. We go down here at the bottom, average monthly cost is $70 for that virtual machine. That's all you're spending. Of course, you can up that. You can go to these, more intensive, look, that's $346 a month, and that's 8 cores, 64 gigs of RAM, 80 gigs of storage. So if you're going to do a web server, but this is just the Azure side of things. Now you can also, there's this pricing overview, how Azure pricing works. We can go there, and that's where you'll see what I was showing you a minute ago, which is this total cost of ownership calculator. So that is kind of the starting point. As a consultant, when I come into a business and that's what they're wanting to do, they're wanting to consider moving to the cloud, I've got to convince them or make some decisions or help them make decisions. These are the places that I'm going to start. So hopefully that gives you a good idea of the starting point here, and this is sort of what you would want to be thinking in terms of if we are going to move from the on-premise environment into the cloud.